Welcome to Family Health by Mini First Aid. Mini First Aid are the UK's leading family first aid provider, and we are delighted to bring our latest podcast series to you, giving you all the information that you need around family health subjects. Thanks for joining. Series 3 of the Family Health podcast is sponsored by Savlon Scar Prevention Gel. Savlon Scar Prevention Gel speeds up healing, helps soothe pain, and reduces the likelihood of scarring when used on minor wounds, superficial burns, and grazes. And to be frank, with my 6 children in my house, cuts, scrapes, and grazes are plentiful. So my first aid kit, saviour, is Savlon Scar Prevention Gel. Hello folks, I'm Kate Ball and I'm the founder of Mini First Aid, and welcome to our podcast Family Health by Mini First Aid. We are so pleased that you've taken the time to listen to our podcast, because whether you're in the car, you're cleaning your house, or perhaps you're relaxing with that luxury cuppa, it's one I still dream about actually when I say this intro, but our Family Health podcast covers a huge range of topics that might affect one of your family members. And if you've ever got a family health concern and you're thinking, I'm just going to Google that, please don't. Please have a listen to us instead. Now today, big topic for us to be discussing, we're going to shine a light on dementia, a debilitating syndrome that affects 1 in 11 people over the age of 65 in the UK. The chances of someone you know, maybe an elderly relative or a family friend, are struggling with dementia right now. And the reality is it doesn't just affect the patient, it affects every single person involved in their life. So I'm lucky to be joined today by Dr Abhi Inglis, specialty doctor in Old Age Psychiatry, and Jayne Sibley. Jayne's experience when both of her parents developed dementia led her to create SibStar, a debit card app helping families living with dementia safely manage their finances. Welcome both Abhi and Jayne.
Hello.
Abhi, going to go to you first if that's okay. Tell our listeners a little bit about yourself and what you do.
So I am a psychiatrist working in Leeds, and the main focus of my work is diagnosing, assessing and managing dementia in people, and providing the support that the people and their carers need throughout that process and for as long as they need, really.
Brilliant.
That's me.
Brilliant. Thanks, Abhi, and thanks for joining. Jayne, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yes, I'm Jayne. I am the CEO and co-founder of SibStar, which is a debit card and app for people living with dementia. The idea for SibStar came from my own lived experience of caring for my mum and dad, both of whom had dementia. And it was through my mum's mismanagement of her money because of her condition that we came up with the idea. I don't come from banking or payments. I've never done anything like this in my life. So it really was something that came from my experience of helping mum.
I'm going to add that Jayne was also on Dragon's Den, which is how we know Jayne, because as you know, Mini First Aid featured on Dragon's Den, and Jayne and I share a dragon. we share Sarah Davies, and it's wonderful to work with a dragon, an individual that really supports some of the things that, you know, have a real purpose to their brand. And we'll hear more from Jayne as we're chatting today, based on her personal experience and also the work of SibStar. Abhi, coming to you first though with a question that's always confused me. People often refer to dementia and Alzheimer's in the same sentence. Are they the same? And why do we use both of those different terms?
So it's easy to see why people would think that they are both the same. If you think about the big charities around dementia, they're called the Alzheimer's Society or Alzheimer's Association, and they do their publicity really, really well. So when you see dementia, it tends to be Alzheimer's that's linked to that word when you see it on TV or hear about it on the radio. But if we go back a step to help me explain, so dementia is not just difficulty with your memory. It's a cohort, a group of related symptoms to create this dementia. And that can be a combination of problems with your memory, difficulties with speech, and anything that affects your thinking processes and your ability to do things. So it tends to be that combination that leads to a diagnosis of dementia. And that happens when the brain isn't working as well as it should be for various reasons. Alzheimer's dementia is a type of dementia. So within that, and it's the most commonly diagnosed one in the Western world, but there are other types of dementias which people may hear and go, oh, I have heard of that actually, like vascular dementia or Lewy body dementia, frontotemporal dementia. So there's a lot of different types, and Alzheimer's is the one that gets the most promotion and advertising, I think, in that sense. That's probably why the two can get mixed or confused with one another.
So talk about what the main symptoms then.
So it can affect every person differently, and I think, and you know, when you talk to Jayne, her experience will be very different as to somebody else's, but people tend to notice difficulties with their memory first. And when I say first, it's probably what makes them think of dementia, because again, that's what they link to it. But basically, it's things that affect your thinking and processing abilities, and when it starts to affect what you do day to day, that's when we'd consider a dementia. So that could be short-term memory difficulties. So, you know, starts off with forgetting where you put your keys, or forgetting routes to familiar places, forgetting to cook that familiar recipe that you're used to cooking, difficulties with speech, so getting words mixed up, forgetting the odd word, sometimes forgetting familiar people's names, or going, oh, I know that, and it's there, and it's not coming to me. But also difficulties in being able to do things that you used to be able to do. So, for example, people working, if they're struggling with a system that they've used all of the time, if they're having to use that now for familiar routes. Now, I know what you're thinking. At the end of a long day, mums especially, that is most of us. And having those symptoms doesn't necessarily mean it is definitely dementia. There are a lot of different reasons we could be experiencing that. But for a dementia diagnosis, we'd say, have you had these symptoms for 6 months or longer? Have they been progressing? So have they been progressively getting worse in whatever time period? And those are kind of the two things that we would ask. If that is the case, you'd go see the GP would say, right, let's do some extra tests, blood tests, scans, a memory assessment. Maybe let's go see a specialist. And that's when you'd come to somebody like me, where we look at a whole host of things before we even consider whether dementia's in the pot amongst the diagnoses.
Okay. Jayne, tell us about your mum and dad then, and your family experience.
Yes, so my dad was the first of my parents to experience actually many of the symptoms that Abby described there, actually, and he was in his early 60s. He is still with us. He lives in a nursing home, but is very poorly now, and he doesn't know who we are, and his dementia is very, very advanced. Mum cared for him whilst he lived at home for a long time, but as he became more complex to care for, she became exhausted, and we had to make the decision to move Dad into a nursing home, which was really tough. Mum did really well for a couple of years. She lived independently, missed him desperately. But really then her condition started to develop. She would, as described, forget keys, forget to lock the door, and start to mismanage her money. She would forget telephone numbers. And she lived at home independently for quite a long time. She had care at home. And that care increased over a couple of years. We moved from a bit of companion care to begin with, up to full-time live-in care until she passed away last September.
I'm really sorry, Jayne, that you've lost your mum, and thank you for talking to us today. And I guess there will be people listening wanting to know where you went for support. So where did you go for diagnosis for mum and dad, and what was the sort of the care pathway, the route for your family? Yeah,
so the diagnosis that mum and dad both experienced were completely different, actually. So it took a long time to get Dad diagnosed, partly because he was in denial of his condition, whether that was the condition dictating his denial or he just genuinely didn't believe that there was a problem. So it took a long time to get him on side with going to visit the GP, who then passed him on to the consultant like Abby, who then did the diagnosis. But we also struggled to navigate the system too. It was our first experience. It was difficult to know what to do, where to go for help, to sort of have the authority to speak to the GP on his behalf, to go and visit him with the GP with Dad. So that took a long time, and that whole diagnosis took about 5 years. With Mum, it was really different. She had already trodden this path. She was very aware of what was going on. She was very open to having the diagnosis. And it really took us sort of maybe 12 months to have Mum diagnosed. That was her character that drove that very much. She almost was prepared to have the diagnosis in support of my brother and I, because she knew how she had supported Dad, and she knew that it would make life easier for me and my brother if we knew, and if there was a diagnosis. She was incredibly generous in that sense. So yeah, two very different experiences.
From the outside, dementia just seems so very cruel and unjust. How do you come to terms with that affecting your parents?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And everybody's journey with dementia is entirely individual. It is, yes, it is a cruel condition. You do watch the person you love disappear slowly, and you definitely go through real periods of time where you don't want it to happen. You are angry. You are desperately want to help. You don't know how to help. Frustration, and a deep sense of I had a deep sense of sort of care and love for my parents, and wanting to help them in every way that I could. I wish I could wave a magic wand and say some gems of wisdom and insight that would make it easier for families. And there aren't, it's really, really hard. I would say now that Mum has passed away, I am very much remembering the Mum she was pre-dementia. Okay. And that is a nice place to get to. Your mind is often occupied with the version of your loved one who was living with dementia for a long time, and that is tough. But you do. Well, I have started to move on and remember, the Mum and the amazing woman she was to me. So, and that is a nice place to get to.
Abby, Jayne said there about the fact that you're watching someone fade away or change in front of you, and it does have this, the family are doing the suffering as well, aren't they? And there's these changes. Why what are these changes? What's happening in the dementia?
So if we think about the brain doing its function, every different part of the brain does something slightly different, and for it to do its job well, all the chemicals need to be in balance, the structure of the brain needs to be appropriate and working. And when there is any level of damage to the structure or the chemicals, things don't work as well. So if you compare it to something like a physical illness like a stroke, part of the brain isn't working anymore. Therefore, that part of the brain that links to those part of the bodies don't work as well anymore. It's a little bit more complicated, but that's essentially what's happening with dementia as well. Certain parts of the brain aren't working as well, and they present with the symptoms that we've talked about. And as the condition progresses, as a person goes through what we would say sort of mild to moderate to advanced, those symptoms tend to worsen and progress. The difficult thing with dementia is you can't predict which symptoms are coming.
Right, okay.
And it can involve a whole host of things. So, we're talking about, yes, the memory struggling, but behaviours can change. And, when you say, Jayne, you're watching the person that disappear, I think that's what is most difficult, because the person that you would sit and have conversations with, they may not be able to do that anymore because they can't process and share that information in the same way. And you love them and you care for them, but you're also really annoyed because you miss that person and you want them back, right? So So if we think about, as an example, there's a part of the brain, the temporal lobe, which is most linked to memory and processing of information. And in Alzheimer's dementia in particular, you get shrinkage of that area of the brain. Shrinkage of the area of the brain linked to memory means you're going to struggle more with your memory. So that's where the scans and knowing which bit's affected kind of helps us understand more than anything else why these symptoms are happening. But again, as an example, when you say it's difficult for family to manage, more difficult for family members to manage than the patient themselves, is the person themselves sometimes isn't aware of these things happening. They're almost protected from that, and they have a different perception of the reality around them. But for us, that is very different. What we're seeing isn't what they're seeing. What they're experiencing isn't what we're experiencing. So when you have somebody who experiences what we call the behavioural and psychological symptoms of dementia, when they're shouting out, when they're physically or verbally aggressive because they're misunderstanding the situation, when they're restless or pacing, we want to fix it, because as humans we naturally want to fix a problem that's in front of us or help the person. But there isn't necessarily a way around that. So I think that is the biggest and hardest struggle with this condition. Understanding it goes some way, but at the end of the day, watching that and not having an answer or a solution is the hardest thing to come to terms with, for family members especially, but even as professionals, it's the thing that we struggle with the most, I think.
Why do people get dementia? And are some people more prone to it? What do we know about that side of whether you're going to have dementia or not?
So technically speaking, anybody could develop a dementia. Some people are more at risk of developing it than others. So age is the the biggest risk factor, because one of the things that causes dementia is damage to the brain, and we're living longer. So the longer you live, the more damage there's likely to be to the brain.
Okay.
So if you're over the age of 75, you're more likely to develop dementia, for example, than if you're under 75. And then the other strongest factor is genetics. So if within a family there is a gene linked to a specific type of dementia, then you are more at risk of developing it than somebody who doesn't have that gene in the family.
Right.
The really important thing to remember there is it doesn't mean you're going to get it. It just means you're more at risk. And actually a lot of people with the gene in the family never go on to develop it. They're just aware of it. So those are sort of the two biggest risk factors. The other things we know from research is that more women have dementia than men. I think that's probably because women live longer than men, more than to do with anything else. And then people who struggle, have poorer body functions if the heart isn't working properly, is people with uncontrolled high blood pressure, uncontrolled diabetes, unmanaged cholesterol, all increase your risk of developing dementia. Traumatic brain injuries as well as something else. So the research thing is, it's ongoing. There's constantly new evidence, constantly new disputes, but that's what we know so far.
Is there anything that you can do to reduce your risk of dementia?
So if I think back to literally what I just said about looking after your body. So looking after your body and being healthy can prevent a whole host of things, including reducing your risk of dementia. So eating healthily, not smoking, moderate amounts of alcohol. If you have high blood pressure, high cholesterol, diabetes, making sure they're controlled, keeping on top of them and managing them well, being active. And one of the other things that we say is to stay mentally active, because one of the things we know is it's called cognitive reserve, and it's your ability for your brain to recover from injury. And you can improve your cognitive reserve by keeping your brain active. So to put it simply, if you think of your brain as a muscle, you use the muscle, then you recover when you injure the muscle. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So, whatever that is, be that puzzles, conversations, whatever it is that keeps your brain on the go, tends to reduce your risk of developing dementia.
Okay. Jayne, I was going to ask you about, we're going to talk about SibStar in just a second, but I just wanted to ask you that what happens once you had the diagnosis for your parents? What happens then? What does that then mean for you as a family, and what happened after that for you guys?
Well, with Dad, it wasn't a surprise
Okay.
because actually, with neither parent, it was a particular surprise because we were very aware of what the symptoms were and were observing those and were quite knowledgeable by that point around dementia, and we sort of knew that this could well be the case. To say that it wasn't a surprise doesn't mean to say that once you have the diagnosis, it suddenly becomes very real and the impact of that isn't diminished in any way. So, it can definitely feel, and I can remember in particular with Mum, it really did feel like we were being sort of pushed off a cliff, to be honest, and to sort of feel like, oh gosh, this is Mum too. So there was a lot to process there. It's quite funny. We sort of walked out of the consultant's room and went back to my brother's house and had a cup of tea and thought, what are we going to do then? And really, there's nothing really what you can do other than start to get your head around it and start to know that Mum might need some support. And I think it's about saying, well, actually, we've been given the information, but Mum's still very capable in many ways. She can still get the bus to the shops and see friends. So trying and looking at the capabilities and the things that Mum or Dad could still do, rather than preempt what they couldn't do. And I think it's quite a good idea to be gentle with yourself and know that this is quite a big deal and that it will take time to learn to live alongside, and whether you ever do achieve that sort of feeling of living alongside or not, it's a degree of being able to sort of accept as best you can what is happening.
Yeah. Okay. Abhi, I was just going to ask you before, because I want to hear from Jayne about this genius idea that she then went on to have. But before we do that, if you are the consultant giving this diagnosis to a family, where's the signposting after that? Where do people then go when they walk out and they're preparing to go home and have a cup of tea as a family and discuss what's just been delivered to them? What happens? What's the next stage for a patient?
So I can speak for the memory services in Leeds and Yorkshire, and what would tend to happen is your GP would see you, decide whether you need a referral to the specialist, that would be our team, get an appointment, everything's discussed, and if a diagnosis is given at that point, you would get follow-up appointments with our memory nurses. So they would provide you, or the equivalent of, where they provide you with the information that we would give to everybody, because I think, as with any big diagnosis, people will hear the word dementia and very little of what's said afterwards goes in. Mm-hmm. And we are fully aware of that. So you will get seen again with family to talk about the type of dementia, if that's been agreed and discussed, and a general conversation about, right, are we thinking about medication? What kind of support do you need? And I think it's, I'm really pleased, Jayne, that your mum was able to do as much as she could independently, because that's something we really promote, is that, yes, it's a difficult condition. However, we are here to support you to live as independently, as safely for as long as possible. And that is where the support comes in. So whether that is people coming in to assist, or actually the person's perfectly capable of managing things at home, they just need a little bit of extra support with A, B and C. I work with the younger people with dementia team, so we give diagnoses to people who are under the age of 65, and some of them still continue working with the diagnosis. Okay. So, but how do we enable them to do that safely if they want to? And so we signpost with things like that, and we offer lots of information around, power of attorneys, if that's something that people haven't come across, if they need support with that. Carer Leeds in Leeds provides support purely for the carers, so it's not just about the person, it's about, right, we understand you need support with this, talk to us about what you may need. And it might just be somebody to talk to, it might be I need to quit my job to help look after my relatives. So how would I do that? And link in with social services. So we spend quite a lot of time once a diagnosis is given doing that. And then if that's something we need to stay involved with, we do. If that's something that can be managed by the GP, the social worker, family, that's absolutely fine. But I think we're very aware that you can't just say the word and go, right, off you go. And the condition progresses, which means the situation changes and the support needed changes. And to stay involved in that, I think, is the least we can do when we're the bearer of the news, as it were. I'm pleased that the support available now is much better than it used to be. But I think there's still a really long way to go.
Yeah, sure. And Jayne, I'm desperate for you to tell everybody about what you came up with, because I think it's so special and very clever. And you focused on a particular vulnerability around financial security. Jayne, tell us about your very clever idea.
Yes, so Sipstar was born out of my experience of caring for mum, as I said, and actually some of mum's first symptoms and behaviours were the sort of her struggle with managing her everyday money. So and dad a little bit as well, actually, but that sort of ability to understand the value of money, understand the sort of value of a £20 note, and this led to her taking money out of the cash point 2 or 3 times a day and giving it away sort of inappropriately, really overspending and sort of forgetful spending, some multiple purchasing, and she fell victim to a lot of fraud as well over the phone. So the money that her and dad had worked hard for all their lives was disappearing in ways it shouldn't have, really. And I knew that being able to maintain mum's financial independence would lead to her ability to remain living independently, which is exactly what Abhi just said was so important. We did eventually have to take away mum's access to her own money for a while, because we just couldn't sustain this sort of level of spending. And by this point, dad was already in a nursing home, so we were very, very aware of the costs of higher levels of care that mum might need. And we're just very, very worried. But obviously you take away someone's access to their money, the life becomes the four walls, and there was no longer that trip on the bus, as I say, or buying the grandkids the Christmas presents, and all of this is really important. What we spend our money on is a big part of who we are. And so we built Sipstar, which, as I say, is a debit card and app. The person living with dementia has the debit card, and then their caregiver, usually their son or daughter or husband or whoever, has the app on their phone, and it's within that app that you can manage how and where that money is used. So you can set daily, monthly spending limits, how much can be taken out the cash point. In fact, you can switch off cash point withdrawals altogether, online and phone spending altogether, and all of this functionality can be changed instantly and remotely, so it changes as the needs of individual customers' needs change. And, we really are about empowering people living with dementia to remain living independently and giving them a safe way to do that without losing their entire pension to a scammer over the phone, which happens, unfortunately. So, that's our mission, and that's what we're set to do, to help families like mine, really. Super determined to do that.
What a legacy for your parents for this very clever idea. Jayne, we will put the links obviously in the show notes, but if listeners are listening and think this is brilliant, I need to know more about this, how can they find out more information from Sipstar?
Well, you can download the app from the App Store or Google Play. Obviously, just look for Sipstar and download the app. You can also go to our website, lots of information on there, or call our customer service team. They are they're amazing. They are UK-based. They all have experience of dementia or caring. So if you call, the phone will be answered by someone who gets your situation and can understand the stresses and worries that you're under. So, we really pride ourselves on our customer service team, actually. So, there's help there if you need it.
That's brilliant. Ladies, we always get to this point in our podcast, and I think probably we could go on talking for a long time because it's a huge subject, but I hope that for those listening, they found it Really helpful just to know a little bit more about the medical facts and around the treatment that you do, Abhi, and Jayne, also that lived experience and also the huge positive piece of work that's come out of your lived experience of a family with dementia. But I always ask for your takeaways, right? This is the bit at the end of the podcast where we say to people, if people could take away one thing from what they've heard you talking about, Abhi, what would you want our listeners to take away?
I always say the same thing when it comes to anything to do with mental health, which is it seems really scary. And I know it seems scary because there's still a lot of stigma associated with a lot of different types of mental illnesses. But there is a support available. It is not the end of the world. And it may not be the worst case scenario. You need to go and get assessed by the people who know what it could be and how to manage it. And go see them, because chances are you'll be reassured and you'll go away and you feel fine about it. And if you don't, you will get the support that is available, and you'll get it from the right people in the right way. So go get the help and get seen to by the right people, not Google.
Yeah, thank you. How about you, Jayne? What would you want our listeners to take away from listening to us today?
Similar, actually. I would say talk to your family and ask for help. You are not alone. There are lots of organisations and people out there who are experiencing exactly what you are. And there's a great amount of sort of reassurance and support that comes from connecting with those organisations or so individuals at the dementia cafes or the memory clinics or whatever is out there. Then talk and seek that support. You will feel better. I'm not here to sugarcoat it. It's hard, but make it a little bit easier for yourself just from time to time by asking for help and reaching out.
Brilliant. Jayne, Abhi, thank you. Thank you for your insights today. I would... Big emotional one, isn't it? You know, and it's a big thing, and I hope that people hearing from both of you today have found that really, really helpful. And we'll signpost links to further support in the show notes from today. And Jayne, I wish you all the success with Sibstar. I'm sure it's going to go from strength to strength. Folks, you've been listening to the Family Health Podcast with Dr Abhi Inglis and Jayne from Sibstar talking to us, Jayne talking about her personal experience. As always, with our podcast, you can download it from your favourite podcast platform. And if you hit subscribe, then it will land on your listening platform without you having to do anything every week, which is great. You can also subscribe to the Mini First Aid newsletter, follow us on our socials, and don't forget to get in touch with us if there are subjects, anything related to family health that you think that Mini First Aid and Family Health Podcast can help with. We love having guests like Abhi and Jayne joining us and sharing their experiences and their expertise. And we hope that you find these sessions really, really informative. You've been listening to Family Health Podcast by Mini First Aid. Thank you for listening to Family Health by Mini First Aid. I hope you found our podcast really useful and informative. If you want to know more about Mini First Aid classes, courses, qualification courses or first aid supplies, please do visit minifirstaid.co.uk or look us up on all your favourite social platforms at Mini First Aid. I take Savlon Scar Prevention Gel everywhere with me so that I am always prepared for the many little and sometimes bigger accidents that my kids encounter. Thank you again to Savlon Scar Prevention Gel for sponsoring Series 3 of the Family Health Podcast.